Hello there. Welcome back to another quiet evening. Take a deep breath with me if you'd like. In and out. Tonight, we're going to step gently back in time. Back to a world lit by candlelight and warmed by fireplaces. A world of horse, drawn carriages and letters written by hand. A world where, for many women, becoming pregnant was far from the glowing, sentimental picture we sometimes imagine today. So settle in. Maybe you're lying under a cozy blanket or curled up with a warm drink nearby. Let yourself listen softly as I tell you this story, not as a lecture, but like a friend, guiding you slowly through the lives of Victorian ladies and the struggles, discomforts, and quiet burdens that came with bringing children into the world more than a century ago. Imagine the sound of a gentle fire crackling nearby, the soft hush of night beyond the windows, a faint wind rustling through trees outside. The room is warm, safe, and quiet, and we have all the time in the world. Being pregnant in the Victorian era was not glamorous. It was exhausting, risky, and, quite often, lonely. For middle and upper-class women, whose days were spent in drawing rooms and parlors, pregnancy meant the slow, unavoidable transformation of their carefully corseted bodies. For poorer women who worked in fields, factories, and kitchens, it meant continuing hard labor while growing heavier and weaker, without much support or rest. Let's picture a Victorian woman at the very start of her pregnancy. Perhaps she's just realized her courses are late. There's no home test she can take, no quick confirmation from a doctor. She simply waits and notices the signs as her body changes, sometimes with excitement, sometimes with dread. For some women, a missed period was good news, the fulfillment of their duty to produce heirs or workers for the family. For others, it was another round of fear, another mouth to feed in a household already stretched thin, another risk to their health and even their life. Victorian medicine was still developing, and childbirth was one of the most dangerous experiences a woman could face. Infections, hemorrhage, or obstructed labor could turn fatal very quickly. But people didn't often speak about these dangers aloud. Women were expected to bear them quietly, as part of the natural order. Clothing made things harder still. In the early and mid-Victorian era, corsets were everyday wear, and most women kept them laced as long as they could. There were maternity corsets, yes, softer, with room for the growing belly, but they were still restrictive by modern standards. Imagine trying to breathe deeply or find a comfortable position with stiff boning pressing around you, and layers of petticoats and skirts adding weight to your frame. Day by day, the body would grow heavier, and simple things like getting up from a chair or bending to pick up something from the floor would become little struggles. But Victorian women were encouraged to remain composed, upright, and graceful, no matter how uncomfortable they felt. Then there was the endless etiquette. A lady was not supposed to discuss pregnancy openly. It was considered impolite to mention her condition too plainly. Often, people would just say a woman had taken to her confinement, once she grew too big to appear in public. This phrase confinement referred to the last month or so when she would withdraw to the home, resting in preparation for the birth. But this seclusion could be lonely. Imagine sitting in a quiet upstairs room, the curtains half drawn to keep out the sun, day after day with only embroidery, reading, or writing to pass the time. Some women found this restful, a little pocket of peace before the storm. But others found it isolating. Friends might not visit much, and even husbands often kept their distance as the birth drew near. Morning sickness, of course, was a problem then, just as it is today. Except there were no ginger chews, no saltine crackers kept at the bedside. Women relied on home remedies, small sips of brandy, or nibbling on dry toast, and hoped the nausea would pass. Doctors might prescribe laudanum, a tincture of opium, to quiet the stomach and help a woman rest. But this could be dangerous and addictive, and many women tried to avoid it unless things became unbearable. Childbirth itself was another ordeal. Today we have antiseptics, pain relief, and trained medical teams. But in the 1008, hundreds. Many women gave birth at home, attended by a midwife or a doctor whose hands might not be washed between patients. Germ theory was still a new idea, and many physicians resisted it. This meant that infections after birth known as childbed fever were tragically common, and yet there was little choice. Women faced these dangers again and again because families were large and contraception was unreliable. Some women spent nearly 2 decades of their lives either pregnant, recovering from birth, or nursing babies. But amid all this hardship, there were small comforts too. Imagine a quiet parlor where a mother-to-be sits in a rocking chair, her knitting in her lap, a fire burning gently in the grate. Perhaps there is a soft ticking clock on the mantel. She feels the baby move, just a flutter, and for a moment she smiles, thinking of the tiny person she will soon hold. Pregnancy may have been difficult, but it was also full of moments like this, private, tender, and quietly hopeful. As we drift through this first part of the story, picture the sound of horse hooves outside on a rainy street, the clatter softened by distance. A carriage passes, then all is still again, except for the wind sighing through the eaves. The house is peaceful, the lamps glow softly, and everything feels suspended as though waiting. Take another deep breath, and let yourself relax, as we will soon continue deeper into this quiet world of Victorian womanhood, following our story into the long, weary months of pregnancy and the hidden strength it took to endure them. As the months pass, the body changes more and more. Our Victorian lady wakes in the mornings with heaviness in her back and finds herself tiring faster as she moves through the house. If she is wealthy, there might be a servant to help her dress, lacing her softer corset carefully, and arranging her skirts so that she can still look proper. If she is not so wealthy, she must do all of this herself, bending and stretching awkwardly, feeling a bit winded before the day has even begun. The household hums around her, the smell of baking bread wafts up from the kitchen. There is the faint clatter of pots and pans, and far off, someone is sweeping the front step. It is a world she moves through slowly now, pausing often to catch her breath. Pregnancy, for her, is not something she can set aside. It colors every hour. By the 7th month, the baby's kicks grow stronger. The ladies of the house might sit together after tea, and someone will say gently, "Have you felt the child today?" And she will nod, perhaps pressing a hand lightly to her side with a small smile. It is one of the few things considered polite to speak of the little movements, the quickening. Beyond that, most details are kept quiet. The Victorians had a deep sense of modesty when it came to the workings of the body. And so, if Our Lady has worries about her health, about the pain to come, about what might happen if things go wrong, she often keeps them to herself. Perhaps she writes them in a diary or whispers them to a trusted sister or friend. But in polite company, she is expected to remain serene. Food becomes another challenge. Without modern nutritional knowledge, she eats what the household provides: bread, porridge, roasts, puddings, and hopes it will be enough for her and the baby. Cravings might be laughed at or indulged, depending on who she lives with. Some medical books of the era advised women to avoid overly rich foods and to keep to a plain, simple diet. Too much excitement, even in eating, was thought to be bad for the unborn child. Doctors sometimes gave odd advice to avoid strong emotions, avoid reading disturbing novels. And to keep the mind calm and cheerful, a woman was told to surround herself with beauty, to look at pretty objects, to think pleasant thoughts, for it was believed this would affect the baby's character. And so, many Victorian homes created soft little sanctuaries for the expectant mother, rooms with pale curtains, fresh flowers in vases, and small sentimental prints on the wall. She might sit by the window listening to the faint sounds of the street, watching children play in the distance, letting her mind wander quietly. If she lived in the countryside, she might take slow walks in the garden, leaning on her parasol, hearing birdsong and the rustle of leaves. There was no rush, no phone to buzz in her pocket, no clock reminding her of endless appointments. Her world was smaller, but in some ways gentler too, except for the weight she carried. Nighttime could be the hardest. Without good mattresses or pillows designed for support, sleep was sometimes restless. Our Lady might turn from side to side, trying to find a comfortable position, listening to the house creak as it cooled. The lamps were put out, the servants asleep, and the only sound might be the faint hoot of an owl outside. And there, in that stillness, she might feel the baby moving again, a little kick against her ribs, a rolling motion deep inside. It is a private moment, at once strange and comforting. She strokes her belly in the dark, as if to say, "I know you are there. I am waiting." As the due date nears, the whole household begins to feel a quiet anticipation. Perhaps the midwife visits, checking her pulse and asking gentle questions. Perhaps fresh linens are laid aside and a small cradle brought in from the attic. In wealthier homes, a nursemaid might already be hired and waiting. In poorer homes, there is simply the hope that everything will go well and that the neighbors will come running if they are needed. The language of the time was full of euphemism. People spoke of confinement, being brought to bed, or lying in. Rarely did they speak of labor or blood. These were not considered suitable topics for the drawing room. When labor finally begins, it might be long and slow. Without modern monitoring, the family waits and prays, trusting the midwife or doctor's experience. The room is kept warm, the windows shut against any draught. Some women were given chloroform or ether in the later Victorian era, especially after Queen Victoria famously used it for the birth of her 8th child. But many still labored without pain relief, gripping the sheets, trying to be quiet, as was considered proper. The moment the baby's cry is heard, the house breathes a sigh of relief. It is over, or so it seems. But really it is only the beginning. Postpartum recovery was difficult too. There were rules for how long a woman should remain in bed, often many days, sometimes weeks, to regain her strength. Visitors would be allowed in gradually, and gifts might be sent: tiny clothes, soft blankets, a few sweet cakes or biscuits for the mother. But not every birth ended happily. Some women were left weak for months. Some suffered infections, or what we now know as postpartum depression, then called melancholia. But they were expected to smile, to be grateful, to tend to the new baby almost at once. And so we see why, for many Victorian ladies, pregnancy was not just a glowing, sentimental time. It was a season of strain, of loneliness, of quiet endurance. It was also a season of courage, though few would have described it that way. It was simply what women did, generation after generation, bringing life into the world despite all the hardship it demanded of them. The fire in our imaginary parlor has burned low now. The embers are soft and red, casting gentle shadows on the floor. Outside, the wind has stilled, and the night is deep and quiet. The story slows with it, becoming a kind of lullaby, a reminder of how far we have come, and of the strength of those who came before. Take one more deep breath, and let it go. You are safe. The house is peaceful. The night stretches on, and you are free to drift away, leaving behind the worries of the day. The baby has arrived now, and with the first cries fading into the night, a new season begins for our Victorian mother. The room smells faintly of warm linens and beeswax polish. The midwife has tidied what she could, and the house is still again, except for the soft sounds of the infant breathing. There is relief in the air, relief that mother and child are alive, that the ordeal is over, that morning will bring a fresh, quiet joy. But for the mother, her body feels as though it has been through a storm. Her muscles ache, her head feels light, and she may drift in and out of sleep in the hours just after the birth. Victorian practice encouraged lying in. A long period of rest and seclusion where the woman was expected to stay in bed. Sometimes she remained there for 10 days, sometimes longer. For wealthier families, this lying in could almost seem like a retreat. Friends might send flowers or small gifts, and the new mother was cared for by a nursemaid or lady's maid who brought her meals, fluffed the pillows, and kept the baby near. She might spend hours just gazing at the tiny face beside her bed, listening to the faint cooing noises, letting her strength slowly return. But this quiet could also be tinged with melancholy. Victorian writers sometimes noted that women wept easily in the weeks after birth. They might speak of feeling low or nervous. Today we might call this postpartum depression or anxiety. But in those days a woman was simply expected to endure it to regain her composure and to be ready when visitors arrived. Visitors were important. After a suitable number of days, the family would allow Cole's female friends, sisters, aunts who came to coo over the baby and congratulate the parents. If the family was very formal, there might even be a small announcement in the newspaper, sharing the news with the wider community. The child's name might be revealed at the christening, a carefully planned event with godparents chosen and special clothes laid out. But before that ceremony, there was the day-to-day work of caring for the newborn. Cloth nappies had to be washed and dried by hand, feedings were constant, and the house had to be kept quiet so the baby could sleep. This was no small task in a busy Victorian household with servants moving about, bells ringing, and street sounds drifting in from outside. Feeding the baby was sometimes done by the mother herself, but in wealthier homes it might be handed over to a wet nurse. Wet nursing was a common practice. A woman, often from a poorer background, was paid to breastfeed the baby. This freed the mother from the physical demands of nursing, but also meant she might see less of her child in those early months. Doctors debated whether wet nursing was ideal, but it remained popular, especially when a lady had several young children in quick succession, and her body was still recovering from the last birth. For the wet nurse, this was work, but also an emotional task, as she cared for a baby that was not her own, often living in the household for a time. If there was no nursemaid, the mother did all of this herself. Imagine her rising in the middle of the night to quiet a crying baby, carrying a single candle as she walks softly across the room. The house is dark, and she is careful not to wake anyone else. She sits in a wooden chair, wrapped in a shawl against the night chill, humming softly while the baby feeds. Outside, the world is silent, except for a distant church bell mocking the hour. There is a strange beauty in these moments, lonely, yes, but also tender, like a secret shared between mother and child. Slowly, strength returns. The lying-in period ends, and the woman begins to move around the house again. At first she might walk only a few steps, perhaps from bed to chair, or from her room to the landing. Gradually, she takes short walks in the garden, or along a shaded lane. The fresh air was considered essential. Victorian doctors loved to prescribe air and light as a kind of medicine. In time, she resumes her place in the household, supervising servants, managing correspondence, and welcoming visitors. Her pregnancy is over now, but she knows another may soon begin. For most Victorian women, childbearing was not a single event, it was a repeating cycle, stretching across many years. Between pregnancies, there were moments of joy, watching the baby grow, taking the child out in a pram or perambulator, dressing them in fine white gowns with ribbons and lace. Babies were often photographed by Victorian studios, swaddled and held still for the long exposure. These images, sepia-toned and delicate, were treasured and kept in albums. But for some women, these joys were tempered by the fear of losing a child. Infant mortality was high, and many families lost little ones to disease, scarlet fever, measles, diphtheria. A mother might keep a watchful eye on every cough and fever, hoping and praying her baby would grow strong. And so, when we say that pregnancy sucked, for Victorian ladies, we mean not only the physical discomfort, but the heavy emotional toll it carried. It was a path filled with uncertainty, hope, and fear intertwined. It demanded quiet strength every day, from the first sign of quickening to the last feeding before dawn. Tonight, as we think of them, We can be grateful for all the advances since their time: modern medicine, pain relief, safe delivery rooms, vaccines, and choices about how many children to have. But we can also let ourselves admire their resilience. Picture them now, women in dimly lit parlors, by fireplaces, holding babies swaddled in soft shawls, their faces calm and tired but proud. They endured much, and they shaped the generations that came after. The candles in our imaginary room burn low again, and the baby in the cradle is finally asleep. The house settles into a hush. The mother leans back against her pillows, closing her eyes, breathing slowly, letting her mind drift. And perhaps you are ready to drift too safe and warm where you are, the night stretching gently onward. You have time to rest. You have time to let go of the day and slip softly toward sleep. As time goes on, our Victorian lady may find herself expecting again, sometimes within a year, sometimes even sooner. It was common in the 19th century for women to have 6, 8, even 10 children. Some had more. This meant that the cycle of pregnancy, birth, and recovery could seem never-ending. A woman might spend most of her 20s and 30s either carrying a child, recovering from birth, or nursing an infant. Her body bore the marks of this: the softness at the waist, the tiredness in her joints, the faint lines and shadows under her eyes. But society expected her to smile, to manage the household, to be a gracious hostess, to keep up with charity work, and to always appear calm and composed. A Victorian lady was supposed to be an angel of the house, selfless and serene, and so many women learned to hide their fatigue behind quiet manners and polite conversation. For poorer women, the demands were even greater. They might return to fieldwork, to factory labor, or to scrubbing floors within weeks of giving birth. There was little choice. The family needed income. These women often had more children too, because there were fewer options for controlling fertility. Some resorted to dangerous methods to prevent pregnancy: harsh herbal concoctions or old folk remedies. But many simply accepted each new child as it came, raising them as best they could in small, crowded homes, where privacy was scarce and life was loud and busy. Despite all this, there were quiet moments of happiness. Imagine a Victorian sitting room on a winter evening. The fire glows red and gold. The children gather around the table, some reading their primers, others playing a quiet game. The mother sits in her favorite chair, sewing by lamplight, occasionally glancing toward the baby asleep in the cradle. There is a hush over the room, a sense that, for now, everything is well. In these moments, all the hardship feels worth it. The mother might smile to herself, thinking of the future, the birthdays to come, the first steps, the milestones ahead. Each baby brought hope, and each child became a thread in the tapestry of the family's life. Medical knowledge slowly improved throughout the Victorian era. By the late 1800s, germ theory was more widely accepted. Doctors began washing their hands, instruments were sterilized, and the risk of childbed fever dropped. But even so, maternal mortality remained a shadow over every birth. Every time a woman felt that first flutter of quickening, she knew she might not survive the delivery. It is hard for us now, in an age of hospitals and antibiotics, to imagine the courage it took to face that risk again and again. And yet they did, because family duty demanded it, because children were wanted and needed, because this was simply life. And so, after many years, when the last baby was born and the last cradle put away, a woman might finally rest. She might spend her later years telling stories to grandchildren, passing down recipes and traditions, sharing the wisdom she had gained through all those long seasons of childbearing. Her hands might be lined, her hair streaked with silver, but there was pride in what she had done. She had kept the family line going, kept the household running, and seen many children safely to adulthood, a remarkable accomplishment in those days. The image of the Victorian mother is not simply one of suffering. It is also one of endurance, of quiet power, of patience stretched over decades. Behind the lace curtains and polished furniture, was a woman who bore pain and joy alike with a still face and steady heart. Tonight, as we lie here together in this quiet, imagined parlor, we can feel the echoes of her world, the slow tick of the mantel clock, the faint smell of wood smoke, the soft shuffle of slippers across a polished floor. The house grows darker, the lamps are turned low, and the fire becomes a bed of glowing coals. Outside, a distant church bell tolls the hour. A horse's hooves click softly on the cobblestones as a carriage passes by in the mist. Then there is only stillness. The night has wrapped itself around the house like a blanket, and everything waits for morning. Let yourself drift with this scene. Picture the room growing softer and dimmer, the baby breathing steadily in the cradle, the mother leaning back in her chair with her eyes half closed. The quiet becomes deeper, like a tide pulling you gently towards sleep. You have made it through this whole story. You have walked with us through drawing rooms and gardens, through confinement and childbirth, through night feedings and the long years that followed. And now we have reached the ending, not a sudden ending, but a gentle one, the kind that trails off slowly like the last notes of a lullaby. Take one last deep breath with me, in and out, and feel your body grow heavier as though sinking into the softest bed. The night is quiet. You are safe. Everything is done, and you may rest now as the story fades into silence.